Let me ask you something. When was the last time you questioned the thoughts in your own head? Most people don't realize this. You're already brainwashed. You've been conditioned by school, your parents, your environment to play small, to settle, to expect average results from an average life. And if you're not deliberately rewiring that conditioning, is running your entire life. I was broke, anxious, angry. I used to believe that rich people had some secret, some unfair advantage. But here's the truth that woke me up. Rich people just operate on a different mental software. So I made a decision. I was gonna reprogram my mind, not with fluffy affirmations, not with hype, but with brutal discipline, radical action, and total identity shift. Let me walk you through 4 specific ways I brainwashed myself to get rich. You can do the same. I treated my beliefs like code and rewrote them. That became the foundation of everything. At first it sounded weird even to me, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Your brain is like software. It runs on programs written by everything you've ever experienced. What you saw growing up, what teachers told you, what your family believed about money, success, and life. And just like outdated software, those beliefs can keep crashing your potential. For years, I didn't even question the things I believed. I thought I wasn't a numbers person. I believed money was hard to make and even harder to keep. I thought I needed permission, validation, or some magical opportunity to get ahead. But the truth is, none of that was real. It was just code. Bad, outdated code that needed to be rewritten. So I started treating every thought I had about money and success as a piece of script. I asked myself, is this true? Is this useful? Is this moving me forward or keeping me stuck? And when the answer was no, I rewrote it. I didn't wait for some breakthrough moment or perfect mindset coach to help me. I did it myself. I would literally sit down and write the old belief on paper and then write the new one I wanted to install. For example, I took the belief I'm not qualified enough and rewrote it into I can learn any skill required to succeed. I repeated that every day. Not because repetition is magic, but because every time I said it, I forced my brain to act in alignment with it. When you change what you believe, you change what actions feel natural to you. Suddenly, things like networking, investing, and taking risks felt less foreign. Not easy, but no longer impossible. Reprogramming doesn't happen overnight, but it's real and it works. Over time, those new beliefs started taking root. I noticed I stopped hesitating. I stopped overthinking. I stopped looking at successful people with envy and started studying them like a scientist. Instead of asking, why not me? I started asking, how can I do it too? That shift changed everything. Beliefs aren't just ideas. They're operating systems. They shape how you process opportunities, failure, feedback, and even time. I realized that my old beliefs weren't based on reality. They were based on fear, on other people's limitations, and on my own past. But I wasn't living in the past anymore. I was building a new future, and that required a new framework. So I became relentless about editing my mental code. When a limiting thought popped up, I paused, I challenged it. I asked myself, who taught me that? And if I even wanted to keep believing it. Most of the time, the answer was no. And that gave me the power to install a better thought, a better belief, one that moved me toward the life I actually wanted to live. That's how it started. That's how I brainwashed myself into thinking like a rich person, by deleting the lies and installing the truth I chose. I didn't just read books or listen to motivational videos. I built systems that forced me to behave like the kind of person who builds wealth. And that's where most people miss the point. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. I realized early on that if I wanted to become rich, I needed to create a life that made wealth building automatic, not optional. So I reverse engineered my days. I asked myself, if I were already successful, what would my routines look like? How would I spend my mornings, my afternoons, my nights? Then I started acting like that person, even before I saw results. That meant setting up habits that kept me focused on learning, execution, and discipline. I woke up every morning and instead of reaching for my phone, I reached for a business book or my notepad. I built the habit of inputting high quality knowledge first thing in the morning. Not junk, not distractions. I wasn't trying to feel good. I was trying to rewire my brain to think like a builder, like a strategist, like a leader. I set time blocks for deep work. I structured my calendar down to the hour. I made commitments to myself that I treated like client meetings, non-negotiable. And I stopped giving energy to things that didn't align with my new identity. The biggest shift came when I realized that habits aren't just about what you do, they're about who you become. Every time I acted with discipline, I sent a signal to my brain. This is who I am now. And slowly, the identity of I'm just trying turned into I'm becoming. I didn't wait to feel like working. I built systems that made work unavoidable. I kept my workspace minimal and focused. I removed distractions. I automated things like meal prep and errands so I could protect my mental energy for strategy, creation, and execution. Another thing I did was track everything: time, money, energy, not to micromanage myself, but to stay brutally aware. I used to be scared to look at my bank account. That changed. I made it a daily habit to review my finances. Because what you monitor, you manage. What you avoid, you lose control over. This wasn't about being obsessed. It was about being intentional. I also built a habit of reviewing my week every Sunday. What worked? What didn't? Where did I waste time? Where did I win? That feedback loop became gold. It helped me optimize faster than any course or seminar ever could. I stopped operating on emotion and started operating on evidence. Most people are inconsistent because they rely on willpower. I didn't. I relied on systems that made the right actions easier and the wrong actions harder. I was designing my environment, my schedule, and my habits to pull me forward, not push me down. And once that momentum kicked in, it started compounding. That's how wealth is built. Not in one big move, but through the systems you live by every single day. I stopped engaging in broke conversations. That was one of the hardest but most powerful decisions I ever made. And when I say broke, I don't just mean financially. I mean mentally broke, emotionally broke, ambition starved, excuse-filled talk that goes absolutely nowhere. I realized that every conversation I had was either feeding my future or reinforcing my limitations. And most of the conversations around me were doing the latter. People complaining about the economy, blaming the government, gossiping about others, defending laziness, glorifying struggle, or making excuses for why they weren't where they wanted to be. That kind of energy is contagious, and it was infecting my mind without me even realizing it. So I made a commitment. I was done tolerating that kind of dialogue. I didn't argue. I didn't try to fix people. I just removed myself. If I couldn't change the room, I changed rooms. Because if I wanted to think like a wealthy person, I had to surround myself with conversations that mirrored wealth, creation, and solutions, not victimhood, fear, and scarcity. That meant spending less time with people who weren't building anything and more time consuming content from people who were. I listened to founders, investors, creators, people who had actually built success with their own hands and who spoke a different language, the language of ownership, responsibility, systems, strategy, discipline. At first, it felt lonely. I even felt guilty distancing myself from people I cared about, but I realized that my loyalty couldn't be to comfort. It had to be to growth, because every minute I spent in a broke conversation was a minute I wasn't building. And the cost of that compounds over time. Conversations are seeds. What you talk about repeatedly starts shaping what you think is normal. If all you hear is doubt, fear, and blame, you start thinking those patterns are facts. But they're not. They're just unchallenged scripts. I didn't want to normalize failure. I wanted to normalize winning. So I changed my inputs. I consumed better podcasts. I joined online communities with people chasing goals. I started following people whose actions matched their advice. Slowly, my internal dialogue shifted. I stopped asking, why is this happening to me? And started asking, what can I build from this? It also changed how I talked to myself. Because the truth is, the most dangerous broke conversation is the one that happens in your own head. The moment I stopped feeding that internal loop of doubt, I created space for better questions, better answers, and better decisions. And that's what wealth is built on. Not just strategy, but clarity. And clarity is a product of the right conversations. So I became intentional with every word I allowed into my ears and every word I spoke from my mouth. I wasn't looking to be entertained, I was looking to be expanded. And if a conversation didn't expand me, it didn't deserve my energy. That's how I built a mind that thinks like wealth, by deleting every conversation that sounded like poverty. Comfort was my biggest enemy, and I didn't even know it for years. I thought struggle was the obstacle, but in reality, it was comfort that was killing my ambition slowly. So I did something that most people never think of. I attached pain to playing small. I made it emotionally uncomfortable to stay the same. Because here's what I realized. People don't change when they're inspired. They change when they're disturbed. They change when the cost of staying stuck becomes too high. And I had to feel that cost every day. I had to create it. So I visualized it. I imagined my life 5 years from now if I didn't take action. I pictured the regret, the missed opportunities, the conversations I'd avoid, the dreams I'd never even try to chase. I imagined waking up in the same place with the same excuses, blaming the same things, and I felt sick. That was intentional. I conditioned myself to link pain to every moment of inaction, every excuse, every time I thought, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. I stopped letting myself feel okay about playing it safe. I needed urgency because comfort doesn't create change, pressure does. I knew I wasn't just fighting against external obstacles. I was fighting against the seductive pull of good enough. The moment you tell yourself, I'm doing okay, is the moment your growth starts to die. So I trained myself to feel uncomfortable with comfort. I reminded myself that the version of me I wanted to become was only possible on the other side of discomfort, discipline, and relentless action. I didn't wait for motivation to strike. I manufactured it by facing the consequences of my potential going unused. I started keeping a list of all the things I'd miss out on if I stayed average. Freedom, impact, choices, confidence, the ability to take care of my family, the ability to lead by example. Every time I hesitated, I looked at that list. I read it out loud. I felt it. I let that pain move me. Most people want pleasure to move them, but pleasure is a weak motivator. Pain gets results. Pain makes you act. And the best part, once you start moving and growing and building, that pain transforms into pride. I also kept the receipts of every time I played small, conversations I avoided, ideas I didn't pursue, chances I didn't take, not to shame myself, but to remind myself of what staying stuck really costs, because it's not just money, it's self-respect. Every time you ignore your potential, you train your brain to believe it doesn't matter, that it's okay to shrink. That's a dangerous lie. So I made shrinking feel unbearable. I made hesitation feel expensive. I made mediocrity feel like a betrayal of who I knew I could be. And from that space of pressure, I grew. I didn't avoid pain. I used it. I transformed it into fuel. That's how I created momentum when nothing around me was changing. I created it in my mind by turning comfort into my enemy and urgency into my ally. Let me leave you with this. Wealth doesn't start in your wallet. It starts in your mind. If you're not actively reprogramming your thoughts, your habits, your environment, then you're unconsciously building a life you don't even want. I didn't get rich because I was lucky or born into it. I got rich because I chose to rewrite the script. I chose to act when it was uncomfortable. I chose to walk away from comfort and face the truth. And if I can do it, you can too. If this message spoke to you, if it challenged you or lit a fire inside, then don't let it fade. Hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more content that pushes you to think bigger, act bolder, and build the life you were meant to live. Your new chapter starts with a single choice. Make it today.